All right. Hi, everybody. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Got a little bit of music running. Got a new fancy mic. I don't think it's in the camera, but if you're having trouble hearing me, let me know, and I'll fix it up as we go. I'm kind of new at this. This is my first stream, so thanks for coming. We're going to talk about some shiny things. We're going to talk about some Alles Bueno. Thanks, Daniel. We're going to do some ReactiveUI, and we're going to do some Prism. If you were on Dave Ortno's stream yesterday, there was a bit of a train wreck with Visual Studio. I'm hoping to recover nicely today. So yeah, let's get going. So I have set up a project already. Nothing too special. I'll show everyone what's going on. We're starting with the basics, and we're gonna go all in with some Prism 7.2, the pre-release. I know Dan will be happy about that. I am doing ReactiveUI, but I'm also going to bring this ReactiveUI Foddy thing just to remove some of the boilerplate stuff, and of course the latest and greatest Xamarin Forms. So what I figured we'd do is everybody knows this cool little app, Reminder on iOS. There we go. It's I'm not going to make it look quite as pretty today, but I'm going to start kind of going through these things piece by piece over the next few streams. So what I'm hoping to do is introduce stuff like an offline sync, using a shiny background job, doing some geofencing reminders. If you ever take a train, I see this all the time when I'm taking a train into downtown, and I see people falling asleep. You know, it'd probably be nice if it kind of gave them a flick in the face to say, wake up, you know, you're at the train station, you better get off. And last but not least, obviously the kind of scheduled dates. That's common, you know. If I didn't have reminders, I'd be, I don't know, pretty chaotic. So it's nice when it sends me a notification to say, hey, you know, your anniversary with your wife is coming up tomorrow. She won't watch this stream, so shh. So yeah, we'll take a look at kind of what we've got. I figured actually the list is pretty easy. So, you know, we'll start with some things here. Building, you know, your common data models. Oh, that's fancy. Now the thing with the emulator is it doesn't do geofencing in that style. Like, it doesn't come up. Whatever. We'll get back to that, I guess. But this is the screen I'm going to try and build today. Just not as pretty. I'm going to bring in one more Xamarin control. It's called Settings View. I don't know the guy that made this, but he's awesome. Is this the one I want? Yeah, Camu. Okay, so I'm going to be bringing that in too. And this is a pretty cool control. If you use table views, or you kind of like that setup in mobile apps, the table view that's out of the box from Xamarin Forms, sorry, Dave, if you're on the line, it's kind of, it looks like crap. This one, you know, if like I know Daniel here, he knows that I hate my UI. This one makes me look like a damn wizard, which I love. So we're gonna try and use that today. So starting out with some basic stuff, I wanted to kind of just show how I build out your traditional Xamarin Forms with Prism. ReactiveUI I only use in the view model, so we'll get to that later. Now, one of the things that Prism likes to do is it likes to have like the views and the view model folder. I'm actually kind of against that. It tends to drive me nuts because I can't find anything. I don't want to look through like 10 million files if you've got like 400 screens. Yeah, I'll make the screen bigger. See, somebody had to. And I'll also get rid of that. How's that? See, my video preview is like a tiny, tiny little window, so everything looks like a mouse to me. So one of the things I like to do with Prism is I like to tell it that the view model and the page are sitting kind of side by side, so that I can see my view model and my page right there in the hierarchy. And it just makes my life easier. Other than that, kind of your traditional container registry stuff, and the commented out code we'll get to after, once I start showing off some of the cool stuff. So that's it for our app. The main page, I haven't done anything yet. I have a feeling what this is really going to be is just our list of items. So that'll be this screen. Can everybody see the emulator all right? Volume on the music? Sure. There we go. How's that? So for the most part, where would someone best go to learn about Prism? Well, they've got a website. I'll share all those kind of at the end of the stream. Bring that question back. All that stuff, if you want to ask later, unless it's like kind of on the screen we're working on. Let's save those questions to the end and I'll answer them all. Sound good? All right, so the main page is just going to be equivalent of this guy. So we're just going to kind of leave this out for now and come back to it. So let's go ahead and make our entry page. This is what I kind of want to hit today. So I'm going to do this guy. So I am going to create a new file. Let's create forms. And I like XAML. I know a lot of people are big on C#. I don't mind XAML. Keeps it out of the way. Tooling sometimes gets a little bit buggy, but you know, they're working on it. It's gotten a lot better than it was, and I don't know, I find the verbosity quite good. You know, it's had tags, it's got binding, it's got all that cool stuff, and it kind of came out of an era where HTML and JavaScript did suck. They still kind of suck in my opinion, but yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. So I'm going to call this edit. I'm going to use this for both, I guess, creation and editing. Kind of put them all in one. And we're going to create our view model. Right now, usually I put these in folders, but right now I'm just going to kind of clump them all in for now. And I'm going to create a view model. Oh, that's not a view model, but that's all right. Let's get rid of this. And we'll get rid of this. And we'll get rid of this. So there is our basic view model. I'm going to start with the view, may as well. We'll try and get something that looks the equivalent to that. And we'll set up some of the basics. I know I don't have any binding yet, but we'll get to that. And we will, I think it's called settings view. Hopefully IntelliSense is working. I updated to 8.1 and I am using VS for Mac, which is, I know it's not a common thing for me, especially since they did an update yesterday. And it went a little rough, but yeah, we'll be fine today, I think. Positive thinking, right, Daniel? I'm just going to bring over one thing as soon as I can find it, because I got to remember what the tags are for this guy. And the IntelliSense, of course, isn't suggesting what I want. I thought it would, but it does not, of course. It's always when you need it to work, it doesn't work. So I'm just looking for the actual namespace because I can steal it from another project as soon as I can find it. Of course, I'm in presenter mode. Just give me 1 second. File open. I'm doing my cheat window on the side. I kind of keep some code so I don't have to be typing the entire time we're here. What's everybody hoping to see today? Give me some suggestions other than what I'm doing right now. Kind of new at this, so you know, the feedback helps. Apparently when you go in presenter mode, it hides your entire desktop, which is, you know, no bueno. No bueno, Daniel. I just need to see my views. Ah, there we go. Okay. And I'm going to put this back in presenter mode because nobody wants to see all my text coming in. And There we go. So now hopefully we have some IntelliSense. Prism. Nobody wants to learn reactive. Oh, okay. Daniel is reactive. We're not learning React. React is the website, man. Come on. And we'll definitely do a little bit of Prism, though. I kind of mix and match between the two, but they'll be both, I promise. So let's, so we've got this little AI forms. If anybody knows who this guy is, find out, because this is a pretty spiffy control, in my opinion. So we're going to create just like a normal table view. It's got sections. So we'll close this. But it's the pretty table view on both iOS and Android, so I'm really happy about it. This one is also bindable. I think it has an item. It does have an item source per section. Yeah, it's awesome. It's everything that the table view should be, in my opinion. So for now, what do we got here? Let's make, I guess, an entry. We'll make a, what's it called on here? AI entry cell. Come on, IntelliSense. There we go. So they have this concept of value text, hint text. I'll share the link after so everybody can see it. And all the source code I'm doing today, I'll put on GitHub so you can kind of see this thing in action for yourself. So value text is the concept of what sits in the box. Tricky. And we'll bind this, I guess, to, what are we going to call this? Title, our title. What does this side call it? No placeholder, of course. Oh, it's kind of a wonky UI, but it's like everybody seems to know how to use it. So we're going to call this, we'll give this a placeholder. Ah, thanks for sharing the link. That's perfect. So we'll make this placeholder title. I like to space these out. What else can we do? We'll do the alarm, I guess. Section. And close section. And we'll put a title on this, which we say alarm, I guess. Due date, scheduled. We'll call it alarm for now. And we'll put, I guess we'll put the checkbox too. So unlike table views where you got to do like a view cell, if you've ever worked with table views, you got to do like a view cell and then put the checkbox in there and then kind of align everything yourself. This guy's got it all. That's why I'm a big fan. And we'll call this one, what's iOS call it? Remind me on a day. Handy. And this binding is checked, I believe. Binding, remind on day. Let's call it that for now. And do we have a date now? The thing with Xamarin Forms is it doesn't have like a date time, like a combined date time formula, which kind of sucks, but I think it's mostly because Android doesn't really have it. Like they have these big massive, like I think that the time is this big massive clock that comes up in Material World. I personally think it's ugly, but you know, I suck at UI without this stuff, so I can't really complain. So I'm going to bind this to a date, and I'm going to create another one for the time. Okay, and time. All right. And the other thing we want to do, now this is going to suck, I'm probably not going to get to this today, but we'll do maps at some point with this. I'm going to do a section, title, what do we call this? Location reminder. And we'll close that. Come on. And I'm going to put in, I guess I'll put in a checkbox. They seem to like these checkboxes. So we'll do, what are we going to call this guy? Title, remind me at location. Come on. Remind me at a location. And we'll do checked. Remind me. Remind on location. This will kind of just be to enable if we're going to do it because it's optional. I guess technically you can have a reminder without any due date or any location. kind of like a to-do list that you're never gonna do. So I'm gonna make another one here. This is like a button. The equivalent would be a text cell in the table view on Xamarin Forms. And this is neat. It's just it's text cell with a text with an actual command I can bind to it, and it puts the little, what do you call that? Less than the marker to say you're going somewhere. So that's pretty cool, and it does that on both sides of the equation. So it does that on Android as well. If anyone's wondering, I'm probably only going to stick to iOS today, though this does work equivalent in the Android side. Just because I'm running a stream, I don't really want to run 2 emulators on this. I don't know if we're already bugging out a little bit, so if anybody's seeing some blips, let me know. So we'll call this location or pick location. And we'll call the value text. I guess we'll have to put something here when we do pick a location, so we'll just put location. And last but not least, we'll bind to some set location. So there, that looks okay. That's a good starting point. So first things first, as with all Prism things, we need to register our page with Prism so it knows how to navigate there. And I'm going to call this called edit page. IntelliSense is really broken today. Anybody else noticing that? Oh, it's because I'm broken. It's not IntelliSense broken. There we go. Now the thing with Prism is you could rename these if you wanted to shorten up the links. I occasionally do something like call this nav, so my link can be like, my URI can be nav/main or edit or whatever you want to do. That's just kind of set up for today. I'm just going to leave it as all the defaults. So there we go. So that's kind of set up for now anyways, and we're going to come back there. So we've got our edit page. I don't usually put anything in the code behinds. If you're putting stuff in the code behinds, probably want to rethink your life choices on it, but let's try and keep stuff out of there as much as we can. Usually only with maps I end up with stuff here. Okay, so we got our edit page. We got our main view. And you know what? From main view, we're going to start with some basic stuff because we obviously have to navigate here at some point. Those that are asking to learn Prism, have you used Prism at all? Or are we talking like blank slate? It's all right if you're blank slate. I just need to know if I should explain everything I'm doing or nothing. Oh, we've got an anti-MVVM in here. Okay, well, you're probably not going to like where we're going with this topic, but that's all right. In terms of Prism, what I use Prism for is the URI navigation. It's pretty slick. If you know Dan, he's awesome. Him and Brian Lagunas work on this. It's fantastic. They're hardcore DI. I don't know if anybody in here's DI haters, but they are hardcore DI. I am hardcore DI. So they have this cool navigation service that's really easy to just, as I was explaining earlier, if I wanted to navigate to say, let's do it, navigate async, I could go, you know what, I want to go to a navigation page, so a fresh one, and off that navigation page I want to add main page, and you basically await it. So it's not rocket science, right? The URI style navigation is pretty cool. You won't take much to work with it. So I'm just injecting this because at some point we're going to need to, if I go back here, of course it doesn't want to let me go back. At some point we're going to need to be able to click on this info button and show this. So for now, we're just kind of setting it up. So we will need a nav there. So this is obviously one of the services we're going to need. Whether we get to this or not today, I don't know. But we'll see how it goes. Okay, so let's start with the view model. We're going to get into some of the reactive UI. I know you want some Prism, but Prism is kind of out of the way right temporarily. And I'll show you what we're going to... Actually, you know what? I can do it right. I can do some Prism. So one of the things with Prism and kind of reactive UI is I use them intermixed. I like to use them both at the same time. More reactive UI in the directly in the view model, and then Prism to manage the life cycle of the view model. So kind of like your on appearing and your on disappearing. I need that at the view model level. Since it's at the page, the view model should kind of know about it. So I'm going to create a base view model. And the reason I'm going to do that, and we'll make this abstract. And everything basically usually inherits from something called iNotify property changed. The ones that are blank slate for Prism, you know what iNotify property changed is, correct? I'm hoping so. I don't want to go that low level if I can avoid it. Okay, perfect. What frameworks have you guys used so I can at least know? Maybe I can relate them as I'm doing this. If you haven't used any, that's fine as well. Oh, you've used Reactive and MVVM out of the box. Okay. All right, so kind of some of the base things I want to use is obviously everybody likes this, the is busy. And I'm going to make this, I'm going to do this the hard way first, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. And it's cool because when I work in VS for Mac, or VS for Windows, sorry. And when I work in VS for Windows, I can just type prop and then, oh, it works here now too. Is that new? Usually what I do is I just type prop and then tab, and it brings up the property for me. I didn't know this worked in VS for Mac. Apparently I'm a noob. So I'm going to go ahead and return busy. I use this. Okay, and the set. I'm going to do... so in reactive UI, they've got this cool little thing. Obviously, we only want to notify our views of a change if there is one. So they have kind of this all-in-one built-in method to do it. Probably you've seen this if you've used Fresh MVVM. I know has something to the equivalent. And so you pass the reference so it can set it, and it'll just say if busy is changing. So if this was true and false is coming in, it'll tell the UI that it's changed. Now, the one thing is I actually hate this setup. I got to admit, I'm a little bit lazy. I don't want to type all this crap every time because I got to do it again for title now. And yes, I can make, macros and all that cool stuff around this, but React. I'm not calling it React, Danny. What are you talking about? I'm reacting to change, okay. I don't like to type all this stuff every time. And if you've done, some people might have used FODI property changed. That's pretty good. The problem with FODI property changed is it tends to grab everything it sees. And I hate that. And it grabs everything that's getting set. So I don't like that because really title should be read only. So I'm going to change this for a second. Well, hang on. No, I'll go back. I could just make this protected. So automatically I've kind of thrown out FODI property changed by doing that. So that kind of sucks. Because I don't want to type. So I'm gonna shorten this up a bit. This is ideally what I'd like to do. Less typing, more deleting code. So I brought in a library earlier called ReactiveUI FODI. So this is obviously pretty close to the same damn thing, except I just have to type the attribute beside it. So what's going to happen when I build this is it's going to take, what we just saw and make it into this ugly, 2 or 3 lines of code automatically. So that's pretty nice. Saves you a lot of extra typing. And then I'll make this protected set because my views shouldn't be setting if it's busy. So there we go. We've got kind of the basic, some sort of basic view model. But now I'm going to do a little, I'll bring in a little bit of Prism now. The reason I use Prism is because I like to have, I like to know about the life cycle of the view model. So when the page is appearing, disappearing, initializing, destroying, maybe you don't want to let the user go off the page. You know, if you're one of those guys that traps your user on a page, you can do that too. So I'm going to bring in a couple of things for Prism. I'm going to bring in page lifecycle aware. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to bring in navigation for now. Navigation. I navigated aware, or I navigated aware. I don't always remember them. Thank God for IntelliSense and cheat sheets on my other screen. I usually just bring this code in from other projects. So there we go. And I'm going to mark these as virtual. Maybe I want to override them. Maybe I don't want to override them. Doesn't matter. So I navigated from is you've come from somewhere. I navigating to is when you're coming to the page. So this is the common one that most people are going to override and work with. This is where you get your navigation parameters. So for instance, if I kind of did that navigation from earlier, yes, I'm building the base view model. So with Prism, if I was navigating to say this page, and what did we call, let's say this was the edit page. So I had edit page. You can actually pass like a query string. So I could say key 1 is a number and key 2 is a string. Here I can do stuff like parameters dot get value and say string key 2 if I wanted to, or I could do int for key 1. It's pretty cool. So it's like a URI style nav if you wanted. You can also strongly type like bigger objects if you want, but it won't be like query string in that classification. It'll just be like whatever your object is. So you could basically pass a custom object. So any questions on that? You can just comment this out and check it in later if anybody wants. Another one I like to pull in from Prism is this guy. So this is when your view is actually being annihilated, like it's not coming back. It's you're popping it off the stack, so it's gonna fade away into dust. So I like to have this one as well, and we'll kind of come back to why after. And one other one. When the page is initialized for the first time. So this is new to, if you have used Prism before, this is new to 7.2, which is still in beta. So don't go using it just yet if you're still using 7.1 and stable. So we're going to do virtual task. And I need to have a return of something, so I'm just going to do task.completed task. So this is the first time that the page is put on the stack, it's going to fire this initialize async, whatever. There we go. So that's looking like a pretty decent view model to start. I'll leave some of the other cool stuff out. Maybe Dan can talk about it later if he's here. That's more for, if you listen to Dan Siegel, he does a lot of the Prism talks. I'll leave those for him a little bit more. He can show off some of the other cool features. Okay, so we've got our base view model here. It's looking all right. So let's inherit that now. And now we're not going to inject anything into this just yet, but we're almost there. Has anybody not done DI? I'm assuming I'm pretty sure Fresh MVVM has some sort of DI. I know MVVM Cross does. Prism definitely does. If you haven't done DI, just let me know and I'll try and explain on a little bit on that. So the first thing is if we're going to edit later, so if we're going to have arguments come into this, I'm going to want to know about, you haven't done too much DI? Okay, well, The good thing is that for the purposes of our demo, so I'll explain a little bit of it. If you put these magical little arguments in here, it kind of just works without going into too much detail. But I'll kind of show you a couple of the ways that this works and how we register some services. So, but for the most part, just assume if I'm putting that service in here, it's either going to work or it's going to explode when we start up the app. So again, I'm looking at I navigated to. Yeah, I can see Tor tab. I know. I got to get used to it now. I'm not a big VS for Mac guy, so yeah. It's nice that they finally have that because they didn't for the longest time. But I used to also be able to command enter, or command return, and it would IntelliSense the namespace. And I notice that's not working now. So maybe my understanding of the key bindings are wrong, but once upon a time. So at some point here, we're going to have to get something that looks like a reminder, I guess. And we'll get it as, just so everyone understands. So this will be an edit if we want, or it'll just be a general create. So I'm going to comment that out for now. So let's close all these because we're only going to now work with our edit page. So I'm going to simplify things. So let me spell title right. So we had a binding for title, which is already done. Well, we had notes as well. Notes is a bigger field though, but we'll add it. I did see that. I'm going to add it just for entry, cell, placeholder, notes. I don't think this control actually has like a, what do you call it, editor view, unfortunately. So I guess it's missing one feature. Oh, you know what? We're also going to have a problem with the title potentially. Oh no, that might be cool. Maybe if the title's changing at the same time you're entering it. Yeah, let's leave that. That's badass. Okay. All right. So now I think we have all of our stuff. So we already had title. Although that I didn't mark that as public, did I? Yeah, I put that as protected because I didn't think title should be changed. So we're actually gonna call this reminder title, just because I want to screw things up, right? So we're gonna go ahead and add our public. Oh, yeah, prop, and we'll do string. And what am I gonna call this guy? Reminder. And we'll mark him as reactive. I don't have any quick parameters set up for this stuff, so I got to type some of it. And we'll do reactive prop. What was the other one? Date time. And that's called date. And reactive prop. And this one for time, it's a time span binding. And what else we got? What else I got up here? Date time. Remind on day, just in case we don't want to remind on day. Let's see, it's a Boolean. Of course, I didn't type it. Let's see. Muscle memory. And what else? Now I am going to show some geofences with Shiny today. I'm just not going to do the creation part because unless anybody wants to actually tell me the coordinates of what I'm putting in, it's probably not worth it. And I don't want to do a map today. So we'll come back to that. And we're going to create, I guess we need 2 commands. So let's add some toolbar items. Are toolbar items still cool in UI, UX world? Any of you UI people? Or do they look like crap? I think it's all right. I'm used to it, but I don't know. Some people like crazy cool buttons with rounded corners and all that crap. I have better, smarter people at UI that do this for me. Daniel knows my term for how I create UIs. So let's call this save. and put a command of save. So I have 2 commands on this page. And I'm going to make these reactive commands. So if you've, Prism has delegate command, fresh MVVM. I'm not sure what they call their command. I think it might just be command. Xamarin Forms has just command, and ReactiveUI has reactive command. You can just use iCommand, and pretty much all of them inherit from this at some point. It has to for binding to work. But for something cool, I'm going to use actually a reactive command, because I'm going to show you how things get pretty awesome for reactive here. So let's IntelliSense this. And we'll create another one for set location, even though I'm not doing that today. Okay, so probably everybody's seen something like this before. So I'm going to create our save command now. You may think start with validation, but I'm going to show you how this kind of works in tandem. So reactive command has a bunch of statics. You can create it from an observable. You can create it just with an action. So I could do something like this. It's nothing special. It disables the command while your code is running. So if you do from async or from observable, it'll kind of lock that command while it's running, which is good. If you've got any users who try and just be a pain in the butt by tapping the button as quick as they can, and then they get kind of the double navigation, this helps prevent it. It's not perfect, but it helps quite a bit. So I'm going to create an async task. We're not going to do anything with that just yet. But normally, if you've kind of done commands, hopefully this is kind of what you end up coding. Hopefully, but not hopefully, and I'll explain that in a minute. So you do a try catch. When you go into the try, you say it's busy. You could do finally. For the sake of this, we just need to say it's not busy anymore. And then probably most people do the thing here. Will I leave the stream in your Twitch channel? Yeah, once I figure out how to do that, I will. You can help me, Daniel. I know you can. All right, so normally people are doing this try catch. They're putting logging of some sort. Maybe if you've got Xamarin Forms, hopefully nobody does this, but if you did, so current page, current.page, current.main page, display alert. I see this a lot. Whatever. If you want to do that, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. But I'm going to show something cooler here, because I actually hate doing this. Try catch this same boilerplate every time. Again, I kind of established that I like to be lazy. I don't like to type the same crap over and over and over again. So this is a mechanism of ReactiveUI. They have something called a global exception handler. And what this is, if you have done observables before, this is called an observer. I'm not going to go too much into details that now, because when people start seeing RX, their brains kind of boil. This command handler, I can inject it. I can inject my logging, which we're going to get to. You can see by the commented out lines. You can run dialogues here, all that cool stuff, and you can do it all in one place. So this will catch any exceptions from your ReactiveUI commands. So, and I'm going to register this after. Don't worry about how it works yet. We're going to get there. So I'm going to actually delete all this code, because I don't need to do any of that, because the error is going to be managed for me. Now, the one thing that isn't managed is the actual the busy flag. So I want to do something for that. So the reason I picked the reactive command is it's got a couple cool properties on it. So it's got can execute, which is slightly different. If you have seen the iCommand interface, it's just a touch different. It's got this can execute, which is an observable. An observable is basically just a C# event on steroids, and I'll show that more in a few minutes. It's got is executing, which that's definitely new. Thrown exceptions, all this other stuff. So we're going to get to some of it. So the one I want to watch is when our command is executing. So I want to watch this guy. So with observables, they've got this subscribe method, which again is no different than if you kind of did. I'm just going to hijack property changed. You know, it's essentially this. It's the same as subscribe, except it's got a couple things in it. And I'll show the IntelliSense if I can figure out how to get it up here. Come on, IntelliSense. Okay, well, let me help it out then a bit. So the first parameter that comes in is X. Oh, did I spell it wrong? Yeah, well, look at my fail for the win. Thanks. So the first parameter that comes in, let me see if this comes up now. Not really. Okay, let me try this again. Now that I can actually type. There we go. So this, one of these, I'm just going to find the one I, okay, so here is the one I want to do. Hopefully you can see that because that's not enlarged font, but basically it takes 3 signatures. It takes an action of Boolean, because this is an observable of Boolean. There goes my IntelliSense. So it's going to pass in an action with whatever it is, true or false. Come on, IntelliSense. And the second one, let me actually implement this now. I'm going to implement this action. Okay, so we're going to do this dot is busy is equal to X, whatever X is. Are you executing or are you not executing? And the next one is our error, or actually this one is saying uncompleted. Let's go to, there we go, error. So I actually don't care about the error here because our global exception handler is going to have it. So I don't, it can just be a dash. I don't need it. But if it does error, we're not busy anymore. We've errored. So let's just tell it it's not busy anymore. And last but not least, observables have a concept of completed. So the last one, there's no action. It's just the observable's done. So is busy. Again, it's false. We're done. And that's it. So now we've dealt with our errors globally. We've dealt kind of with our is busy. I'm going to show you how we deal with that globally in a minute. But that's all of it wrapped up in one nice little package. Now, what I usually like to do is take this and put it in our base view model, or view model below. And I like to create this little guy, little method. I can't create it as an extension because I need to see this is busy flag. So I'm going to put protected. This doesn't need to be virtual. Bind busy. And we'll pass in, I guess, a reactive command. Reactive command. And we're basically going to take that wad of code that I just did. And grab that. And do command.isExecuting. Good. I think I typed that right. If I didn't, somebody correct me in the channel. Looks right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say bind busy and save. So that's it. So you do have to do the one-liner to bind to busy. I haven't found a way to do this kind of on a global scale, but any reason why not to use RX2 property? Yes, because I want to be able to set is busy elsewhere. But I am going to use two properties shortly, so I'm getting there. Okay. So we've got that bind busy. So one of the things too is you don't want these commands to execute if something is, bad, right? I like to say that the command isn't ready to be executed. You either haven't entered all of the information, or like for instance, when I went into test here, see, done. I can't actually done. It's kind of stupid. I can't cancel out of here either, but whatever. They did. Good. There we go. So we want to do the equivalent. So if you don't enter a title on this, you know, why can you click save? You shouldn't be able to click save. So normally people might do something like this. You might say, you know, if this dot tiny, or if this dot title is string is null or empty or white space, maybe return out of this and probably show dialog of something, right? That's kind of common. This is wrong. This looks awful. Okay, so we'll delete that. There are cases where you might want to do that, but it's very, very, very rare once I show you kind of the cool stuff. Another way is to react to it as it's changing. So you can do stuff like property changed. This is the bad way of doing it. You could say if the property that's changing, what is a property name, equals to the name of title is changing. Check if it's null or white space here. Maybe display an error. I don't know. That would probably be a bad idea, but you could do, this is what you would essentially do. Maybe set an error message if it was. But, or you have to, and now you'd have to tell the command, command disable. Like you'd have to disable the command. So, but that's kind of a crappy way of doing it. Reactive commands have this cool thing built in called when any. And what when any is it returns, again, an observable on steroids. So the one I said I wanted to watch was title. So I want to watch title for change. And what I'm going to do is this guy's expecting, come on, Intel. That's a stupid thing. I got to complete it. So let's do title. I'm going to add some more here in a minute, but if all the conditions pass, this returns true, which means our command is enabled. But if string dot is null or white space, title. Now, I just want to explain a couple things. Oh, you know what? Before I do this, I'm getting the actual property wrong. I got to get reminder title. Reminder title. And there we go. That's a little bit better. I got to really change the name of it. I know you can give me shit after. That's close enough. So there's two values here. There's value and there's get value. If I can find it here, get value. So what this is they tell you not to use value. It really depends because what happens is when you get this property here, it hasn't actually reflected the change of title. So it's like it's a holder. It's called an observed change. So it's telling me that, you know, a string has changed. The name of it is probably this reminder title since it's passing in a list of arguments, which I'll show you some more in a minute. And so they tell you to use get value when you want the reflection to occur. So I want the reflection to occur because I want to know, is the stupid thing empty? And if it is, get out. Command is disabled. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Anybody kind of losing their mind? Reactive is when you start seeing this stuff the first time, I know people are like, whoa, like what's going on? Okay, well, nobody's complaining, so I keep going. So the other two things I want to watch, I will have to get into this remind on day, but I think for now we're just going to watch the date and time. Now the thing is that these are separate, right? They're two different things, but I want to evaluate them. Did I call it date? Yes, I did. I want to evaluate them together as a cohesive unit, right? And what I want to do is make sure, can't you go string dot is value? Yeah, I could, but let's do this easy so far. We'll keep it easy. Let's not get into too much cool C# syntax. So what I have to do is I have to combine this date time everywhere. And I have to actually show this somewhere too. Like I have to show it in kind of a pretty fashion, potentially as well. So I don't want to evaluate them separately if they're set. What I want to do is actually combine them and then evaluate on that. So let me show you what I mean by that. So I can do this dot when any value. So this is different in that I don't know how I want to evaluate this yet. Like I don't know what's coming out of here. Is it Boolean? Is it datetime, which it is going to be datetime? Is it a string? Who knows? We don't know yet because we're defining what it's going to do. So I want to watch date and I want to watch time if they change. And yes, there is some cool syntax to save you a few lines of code here, but I want to do what's called a transform. So if you have used any RX, this is very link centric for you. So what I'm going to do is it's going to give me two arguments here. It's going to give me a tuple of a time span and a date. Okay, so there is two arguments there. It's just mad at me, right? Because I haven't done anything with it yet. And what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to create a date time out of this. Okay, so date time, the first argument is the date. So it's only the date. Just joined. Shiny stuff will be used shortly, Danny. I'm almost there. So we're going to do date item 1. Oh, it came in as a solid. Okay, it didn't come in as two arguments. It came in as a tuple. So I'm going to do x item 1, and we'll do year, x item 2, or x item 1, month, x item 1. There are better ways to do this. What I wanted to show was just kind of how these things come in, but this will be pretty cool in a second. It'll make sense what's going on. And then we'll take the day, and then now we got the time span. So I want item 2. Because that's item 2 in our list there. And I want hours. I don't want the total hours. I want the actual, just the hours. And the minutes. And then who cares about seconds? If you're worried about seconds in your reminder, you're probably not having a great time in life. Okay, so we've transformed this to a date time. So when I go .subscribe, you'll see that the argument coming in here is very much a date time. Is everyone good so far? Any minds being blown? So normally what people tend to do is something like this, and I'm going to show you why this is not ideal. So we're going to do date time. We're going to call this alarm date. So this is what people normally do. They may go private. And then you have to do subscribe. Let me go back up here. And then I have to set the alarm date equals to X. So that looks good. People think that looks good, but it's actually a little bit extra than we need to do. There's also a case where we may have to change the thread and all that junk. So we're not going to get into that. I'm going to show you kind of a different way to go about this. So somebody asked about this earlier, was the concept of toProperty. And what toProperty is, let me just delete this and this dot alarm, come on, figure it out, alarm date. That is what I called it, right? Alarm date. Yeah, that looks right. Okay, so we're going to delete this because this actually this is a special kind of property, and we're going to put in read only observable as property helper, date time, and alarm date. Finally Dan's here. If you've got questions about Prism, you can bug him. He'll answer for you. He's probably come to heckle me, so I'll just turn all the audience on him. Everybody loves Dan. Dan's awesome. All right, so I've got this cool alarm date. I've done toProperty. I have to set that property. So what this is it's just kind of a nice way of wrapping all of the stuff together without having this reactive property that I have to subscribe, that I have to dispose of later, which we haven't gotten into. It kind of just wraps it all into one nice little shell. But if I'm going to do that FODI thing one more time. I'm going to show you FODI. And I'm going to do, so they've got this X. So FODI does some really wild stuff under the hood. Ooh, I better change this too. We're going to get to, we're going to watch alarm date. We'll get there in just a sec. And I'm going to delete this because again, let's delete some lines of code. And we're going to put get. And there's this cool little attribute that you stick on the get. Where the hell is it? There we go. Called observable as property. There's our attribute. So now this is magically going to, it's going to watch date time, both of them. It's going to combine them and transform them into a date time. And then it's going to magically set this on alarm date. And what's cool is this is going to react to change. So as one of these changes, it's going to build our combined date time, which is going to fire our change. So that's pretty awesome if you ask me. I think that's just wicked. And what I want to do now is I want to say, like, you have to be, if you're going to set a reminder, it probably should be in the future. I don't know, Back to the Future maybe if you're cool. So I'm watching the alarm date. Let's call it alarm. Something a little bit more explicit. So if the alarm get value is less than now, and I'm going to use now, not UTC, because it's relevant to me, return false. So that's pretty cool because now we've done our validation, our disabling of commands, our building of all that logic in one shot, all in one place, right? It's all in one place. We don't have to do anything. You may want to show an error message, but honestly, if your UI is simple like this, you probably don't need to bother. Is there any questions at this point? I can kind of stop here for a second before I move on. Nothing. Quiet audience. All right. So now that we've got what we know is reasonably valid data right now, our command can run. We don't need to do the try catch because we know that we don't care about the try catch, and we don't need to worry about is busy. So we got to save this somewhere. So I'm going to bring in SQLite. Now, normally with a lot of apps that I write, I like to abstract all my data out of my main library. But just to kind of prevent everyone from losing their mind about what the hell I'm doing, I'm just going to kind of jam it in here for now. So everybody should be familiar with this library. Dan, you tell the jokes. You make the jokes. I'm going to have you on a stream sometime, and then I won't do what you did to Brian, but I'm going to have you on a stream sometime, and you can make all the jokes. I'm worried if I bring David Ortno on the stream, he's probably going to get mass revenge with me just for yesterday. So now we know our reminder title and our alarm date should be good. We want to save this. So let's make a data model. Let's make a folder called models. And what do we call this? To-do item? Sure. Looks good. And what did we want? We wanted a title. And we wanted notes. That's a good one. A due date. Now I'm going to make this nullable only because due date is going to be nullable. I could do those. I don't think people are necessarily prepared for my humor though yet, Daniel. We got to warm them up. You got to earn that right for me to make noises. I'm going to add some GPS coordinates because we want to do, we are going to get to this today. I am going to show some shiny things if you came for shiny. But we had to build our UI before we can build the shiny bits, so that's what I'm doing. So the reason these are all nullable is because they are going to be optional. But we're just not setting them today. One other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set an ID on this. Now people usually do this, but I want to sync this offline in kind of like a multi-tenanted or multi-user database. So I'm going to actually make this a GUID so that I can set it. And I'm going to mark that as the primary key. And just because I'm going to forget to set that ID every single time, I'm going to, if I'm newing this object up, I'm just going to say GUID new GUID ID. And if I do load it out from the database, it'll just overwrite whatever I made. And next, let's create our connection. And what are we going to call this? To do SQLite connection. Looks good. And I'm going to make this guy async. SQLite async connection. And I'm going to autocomplete him. So this is one of the things that people often have a tough time with is, well, this is cross-platform and .NET Standard. You need to know one thing about these databases, and that is where the heck you're going to store them. So you can't just come in here and go todo.db because iOS and Android are going to go, yo, what is this? You know, where do you want to save this? You have to give an actual full qualified path for this. So if you've used Essentials, I'm assuming everybody here uses Essentials because it's built into the projects now. They do have File System Helper. I've ripped Essentials out of here because I don't really need it. So now I'm going to bring in some of Shiny. And the reason I'm going to bring in Shiny is because Shiny essentially has all of the stuff that Essentials has, because I need all that stuff to do all the other cool stuff that Shiny does, like the geofencing, like the background jobs, Bluetooth, all that stuff. I need all of those file systems, that storage, battery information. I need all of that. And I didn't want to bring Essentials in because Shiny has an interesting future in which I'm going after Tizen, macOS, IoT, kind of those Meadow boards. That's all planned in the future. So I had to break free of Essentials to do this. And also, to be fair, I've had a lot of these plugins for years. So I'm just continuing to use them and move them forward. So in this, I want to use notifications. So Shiny is in beta, just in case anybody knows this. I'm not quite ready to release it. I'm almost there. You can ask Dan how stable it is. I think he has his ups and downs, depends. We're getting better though, aren't we, Dan? We're almost there. So I'm going to bring in locations, and I'm going to bring in notifications, and this is also going to bring in Shiny Core, which is this guy. This is the main kind of head honcho that drives everything. So I'm going to go ahead and install that. And eventually, there we go. So Shiny actually uses Microsoft Extensions dependency injection, which is used a lot by ASP.NET. If there's anybody that's done ASP.NET Core, this is out of the box there. I think they did an awesome job. It doesn't have every kind of bell and whistle that you see in something like AutoFac. Yes, I know, Dan, you hate AutoFac, but AutoFac is awesome. It's a little slow, but it has every single bell and whistle, so it is going to be a little slow for sure. But, whoa. Well, there goes the background music. Did anybody care about the background music? Do you like just hearing me, or should I restore it? I am using DryOC. I hope the background music is running. I'm using Pretzel Rocks, which is like a free, I don't know, James Montemango suggested it, and it's all royalty-free music. It seems to work, except when it crashes right in the middle of my demo. It's kind of annoying. Can you hear the music again? Is it restored? I can't hear anything, so. You can't hear anything? Okay, there we go. Okay, so now that I've brought in Shiny, hopefully it came in here. Again, the Shiny core is kind of what I'm after. And it has the ability to inject file system. So I'm going to inject file system. There we go. And what I'm going to do is the file system library has the actual directory. So if you've done, if you've ever used SQLite, probably something you're doing is setting like a static value with where your app data path is. Maybe you've got some clear, cool trick where you can do, inject the path. I'm going to show you how file system gets injected in a moment. Or maybe you're just using Xamarin Essentials out of the box. The reason I don't use Xamarin Essentials out of the box is because I like the dependency injection and I'd like to make this testable. So by being able to inject file system, I'm able to deal with unit testing, which I'm not showing. I should be showing unit testing, but maybe another stream. This app is going to be multi-stream, so I'm not finishing it today, obviously. Okay, so we've got our to-do SQLite connection. The first thing I want to do is create a table on this. I'm not going to do this asynchronously. I'm just going to create table, and I'm going to do to-do item. And I'm going to IntelliSense that using to-do models. Does anybody know what the key combination is for VS for Mac? To just like insert this thing instead of having to go to quick fix. It used to be command return and now it's just gone. I wish I knew what it was. It would make my day. Async table query. So I'm just creating a queryable mechanism so I can look at this data. This dot table to do item. Okay, so our database connection is created. I'm going to come back to this after. We just needed to get it created because now we need to get into some of the cool stuff. So what I'm going to do, if anybody can, if you can link my starting with Shiny blog post here. I should have these links nicely set up. I know Daniel has it. But I'm going to go through that starting point, but there is kind of documentation in my blog how to do this. So if you're kind of getting lost at what's going on, it'll help you out. Option return. I'm going to try that. I'm going to hold you to that, man. Okay, so I'm going to create this Shiny startup. So this is, if you think about startup, it's the equivalent to what you do in ASP.NET. And we're going to call shiny.startup. And okay, so it's option return. Ah, yes, man. Okay. So some of the Shiny services I brought in were what did I bring in? I brought in locations for geofencing, and I brought in, I'm not using your extension yet, Dan. I said we have to go in phases. Phases, man. People aren't ready for all these libraries. Okay, so the one thing I want to use is notifications. We're going to do some notifications with this. If we set a due date, I want to use notifications. Okay. So you'll notice I kind of took the C# or the ASP.NET Core way of doing things. A lot of people won't know, do I have to make this a singleton? Do I have to make this a transient? Some people go, WTF, what's a singleton, right? By the way, is my chat working in the stream? Can anybody tell me? I do have a chat. There's a big black bar. I just don't see the chat going there. A little preview window. Somebody can tell me in a second. So the other thing I want to do, so I've set up notifications. It's now injected. It is a singleton. That's a shame. See, I fail at streaming. I'm working on it. So it is plugged, but it's not working. Figures. So I want to use notifications, and I want to use geofencing. Geofencing. So let's bring in using Shiny locations. Now what Shiny's pretty good at is the backgrounding. And what I do with the backgrounding is I do something very similar to iOS. I use a delegate. So I'm going to actually create our delegate now. And I'll show what these things do later. Let's put it in infrastructure. That looks like a good place. So I'm going to call this geofence delegate. And it's going to complain that this isn't inheriting from the interface, but that's all right. Okay, and option enter. That's beautiful. Now I can remember how to do that. And I'm not sure why it's, okay, now it's complaining about the interface. No, Daniel, I'm using the Mac version, man. I didn't use Streamlabs. I have to be in Mac. You know, I ended up buying an Elgato, one of those Elgato kind of streaming cards, and it sucked the life out of my CPU, and I just don't know why. So I was going to have a separate Windows machine. Like I have that old Surface Book, but it's a Surface Book 1, and it just annihilated that computer. I thought it was going to blow up. The Elgato's terrible? Oh, I'm going to go yell at James. I spent 150 bucks on that thing. Don't tell me that. Now I'm depressed. Okay, so we've got this little geofence thing. So what this task is what this delegate is gonna do now that it's registered in our startup, and I'll show you how this kind of flows in a minute. It will fire this in the background. So if your app is in the background, iOS, UWP, Android, etc., it will fire in the background. If you reboot your phone on Android, I know this is a common thing that people ask for, and this is kind of why Shiny has a core and an infrastructure, is you need to persist those geofences, and then when Android reboots, you need to restore the geofences. So it's kind of a pain in the ass. Android's always a pain in the ass. So this is just kind of built in. Now, one of the other things about delegates is you can dependency inject into them. So how do I explain this? One of the things with current, like using Essentials, is that Essentials technically has to spin up with your actual like Xamarin Forms app, and so it needs basically the UI. The problem is with Android services and broadcast receivers and all that junk is they're never going to spin up your UI. They're going to fire when the device reboots, and your infrastructure is not going to be there. So with backgrounding, you kind of have to bring your infrastructure to the delegate, as where most kind of Xamarin developers are used to just hooking to an event or going async and hoping to hell that fires. The problem is that event and that memory is long gone, so it doesn't work. So what I've done is with Shiny is I'm initializing with the application or with the main app delegate, and I'm bringing your infrastructure to the background. So that's kind of a flip on what's been done. So with this geofencing, I know we haven't really set it up entirely yet. When I do cross this, when this does fire, I want to send a notification. And so I'm gonna keep our notifications. I'm gonna bring in our SQLite database. Again, I don't like bringing SQLite directly in, but we're just trying to get the demo done. So I'm gonna bring in our to-do SQLite connection. Okay, I'm gonna save them. So these will be dependency injected, and I'll show you in just a minute. So even when we're in the background, we'll have access to our normal stuff, our normal database, notifications, and all that cool stuff. So now what I'm going to do is, we have the concept of the geofence region. Does anybody not know what a geofence is? I'll give everyone a second. It's all right. There's no stupid questions, no stupid answers. If you don't know what a geofence is, I'll explain it. If I don't hear from anyone, I'm going to assume you know what that is. All right. So with the geofences, what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to set the geofence identifier, which is just a string, I guess to the ID of our to-do item. So I'm going to GUID parse this guy. I know we haven't done this code yet. It's just, I'm kind of envisioning what we're going to get to in the future. So I'm going to have our to-do ID out of this. And then what I want to do is get, I want to get out of the connection to-dos. Actually, I think there's a get async. Yep, that's what I want. And I want to do our to-do item because I want to get it out of the database. Okay, so we have our to-do now. And what I want to do is send a notification. Send. And new. Actually, you know what? There's two ways to set a notification. So there's the full notification object, which has a whole whack of stuff in it. So it's got like your message payload. We won't go into what that is today. The raw message, the title, the sound, if you know how to set that. There's some Android specific parameters. There is a scheduled date and etc. For the all intents and purposes in this notification, I just want to send the title and I guess the notes. If they haven't been set, who cares? We'll deal with that later. And that is it. That's it. That's how we deal with our geofence. If the geofence is only set to go off once, which I'll show you those settings in a minute, it'll delete the geofence, and then in which case this will only be called once. So it's like a one-time reminder. So eventually we could even say to do, I didn't add this yet. We're gonna actually have to add this at some point. Let me go back to our data model. We need to say a date completed, I guess. Public date time, date completed, or completion date. So maybe, for instance, I may want to say to do date completed. I guess this might be stupid, but whatever. We'll do it for now. And then I want to save it. So the geofence is fired. You know, great. You're done. Any questions? I think that's pretty badass. This is what I aimed when I started Shiny. I wanted this to be easy. Because I've done backgrounding like 400 times and I screw this up every time. Every single time I find some way stupid to break it. Bluetooth is even worse. We're not going to get into that today for sure. All right, so we've done our geofence. Let's do our reminder notifications. I've got about another half hour on the stream, so I want to do. So let's save our to-do item here. Let's do, now we can actually save this. If we go back here, I'm going to inject our database. Actually, I'm going to inject a few things here because we're going to use a whole bunch of stuff now. So we now have a database. What else do we need? We need notifications. Notification manager. What else do we need? I need the geofence manager. I need to make a geofence. We're not going to do that today, but I'll just kind of show you some of the quick wins with it. And we'll say all right. So now we've got our connection. I'm going to save our new item. We're going to assume it's new right now. I realize this can edit, but we'll do that in another demo. So I'm going to do update or insert async new to do item. Let's do enter. You know what? I'm going to need that object because I'm creating a GUID. I'll show you why I need this separate. Okay, so basically, if you remember in this data model, I automatically instantiated ID because I'm lazy. I'll forget to do it every single time, and then I'll go to insert it, and it'll be like, "What is this, man?" I'll always forget. I guess I'm getting old. So we're going to set this by the reminder title. I'm going to set our notes. I'm going to set our. I did put a notes, didn't I? I didn't. Oh, okay. Let's add one. And string.notes. Hang on. Does Shiny have background GPS significant location change monitoring, or does it? No, it does have GPS. I'm working on kind of some of the stories around it. Right now it's fairly basic and it does it by time orientation. So it's more for real-time GPS in the background. I'll probably be doing a blog post on it soon, but another guy you can talk to is Dan. He's using it quite a bit. He's helping me kind of evolve that, but it does do background GPS. It's built into the location package now. I'll also link the Shiny samples at the end of this because it's pretty intense in there. Actually, if somebody has the link right now, if you could share it, I'd love you long time. Okay, so now we've got our notes. We have our schedule date. What did I call it? Due date. Way to call them the same thing. And we'll call that alarm date. So I do realize that eventually alarm date will be optional. It's just we're just going to get through it. So there we go. I've saved a due date. Alarm date is required for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create our notifications. But before I can actually create notifications, I have to request permission. And I have to say request access. So what this is going to do is it's going to say, hey, Mr. User, we want to bug you frequently. Even though you're the guy asking us to send reminders, I gotta tell you about this reminder. So can we please have access to bug the shit out of you? So request the access. This is really only valid for the most part to iOS. It's only going to do it the first time if access is granted or if it's unknown. It'll ask it one time, and then after that, if it's denied, it just won't set up notifications. So I could do stuff like if the access is denied, if access is denied, you could trigger a pop-up. I'm just using the static for now. I know this is bad. I wouldn't do this normally. Display alert. No notifications for you. So I could do something like that. We'll leave that in there. Or I'll comment that. Okay, so now we've got permission. We know it's available. Now we're going to actually create our notification. So before, when I was doing it in the delegate, I was just saying send it. Here, like send it now. This notification is ready to fly. In this case, notification isn't ready to fly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use send, but I'm going to create a full notification. And I'm going to put a schedule date on this, which is equal to our alarm date. I'm going to set the title to, what did I call that? The reminder title. So I can't keep these. I called it a reminder title here, yet I called it a to-do item on the other side. I really should fix that. I gotta get the terminology down. product managers are losing their mind. And we'll put the notes as our message. And there we go. We've created a future scheduled date cross-platform notification. Kind of just to make you aware of how this works. On iOS, it's going to fire like pretty much instantly when the time is due. Android and iOS, I use what's called a background job to get this done. So background jobs, iOS, it kind of runs as iOS sees fit based on, it knows how you're going to use the phone. So background jobs on iOS aren't really good for precision or specific timing to fire. On Android and UWP, the story there is that it's roughly 10 to 15 minutes based on every time it's going to fire. So if you wanted it to fire, say, let's say at 5 p.m. tonight, it's going to fire, it might fire like 10 minutes after that, just because of the way when that job is going to wake up. So again, iOS or Android and UWP, those jobs are running every 10 minutes and every 15 minutes apart. On iOS, it's for notifications, it's on demand, but the background jobs are when it damn well decides to run. Does that make sense? Any questions anybody wants to know there? It's just some people think that the periodic for background jobs with Shiny they think it's just going to run on a regular interval. And what iOS does this pretty good, and I actually like this. It knows when I'm sleeping. It knows when I'm not going to use the phone, so it doesn't incur those background jobs at night because I'm not looking at it, right? And if you had to let me know something, send a push notification because that's more appropriate if you needed to do something real time. So that is it. Now I am going to show the geofence, even though we haven't set it up, and I just want to show kind of how easy it is for that as well. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to request access. I'm just going to reuse our access variable there. And I'm going to do the same darn thing here. Now your user's obviously much more likely to shut down backgrounding geofence, but whatever. You do what you can, right? If the user says no, you got to deal with it somehow. So in this case, we've been given permission. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do what's called start monitoring. And we're going to do what's called a geofence region. We're going to create a geofence region. So for a geofence, the requirement is simple. You have to set, hang on, what's my IntelliSense doing here? We have to set an identifier. So like I said before, in order for this to work with our delegate, I need to put the identifier as the GUID of the to-do item. So I'm kind of piggybacking a little bit. So I'm going to do to-do.id, and I'm going to say, what aren't you liking here? Oh, I got to create this. Sorry, this is a constructor argument. That's why. .id.toString, because these are required. If you don't set them, your geofence isn't going to run very well for you. Let me get rid of this. Constructor for the win. Okay, so we've got our identifier. We're going to create a position. Now, this is what we'll set from the map later, but for all intents and purposes right now, this will kind of do. So our lat and long would be where we want this to fire. So I'm just going to use 1 and 1 for now. And the distance is based on how wide that geofence, like what's the total radius of how far we want to watch. With geofences, they're not a precision science. I usually say they're within about, let's say 200 meters, maybe 300 or 400 feet for the Americans in here. You can set it from meters, kilometers, or miles. I do the calculation for you. So let's set it from miles because I'm guessing a lot of Americans in here. Fair assumption? You know what? No, I'm going to do it from meters. Meters is the best. So we'll do it at about 200 meters, I think is pretty good. So as you're coming into the station, it's going to vibrate in your phone, right? We want to send that great metric people. I'm going to guess that AU is Australia. Yeah. So we're doing 200 meters, which I think is, what's that, about 300 and something feet? Close, give or take. So there's two other things with geofences, and these are optional. You can set, if you want them to notify on entry or on exit. You got to set one of them. By default, I set them both. So it's going to fire when it goes into and when it goes out of. Now, in cases of a notification in a reminder app, this is the one time I think I would actually set it only on the entry. So I'm going to set on the exit, I don't care. On the entry, I care. Because I want it to tell me you've gotten there. If I'm leaving it, it's too late. I'm already leaving it, right? So this is actually, I had these parameters, but I never really thought if I would use them. And I find a use. Can you do a time and exit? No, because you'd have to implement that in your logic, Dan, because the geofences they don't care about time. They just care about that it did happen. You could do that in your logic. You would probably do that in your logic. So let's say I didn't care when it's going on. Like I could save it to my to-do item to say it's only valid at this time, but I couldn't do it here because it's not really relevant. Like I may enter the geofence at 8 a.m. tomorrow, or I may enter the geofence at 10 p.m. tomorrow. It doesn't care. Let me see. I may have missed it. What does request access do? So request access, Osmosis 311. It's basically asking the user, can I use your background? Can I monitor we have to monitor if we can track their location to run the geofence. And for the notification, it's, can we send you a notification in the background? Is essentially what we're asking. If you can't get permission to it, it doesn't matter what you do. You're not going to be able to tell the user. So, but you can react to it, right? So if what would happen is if request access returned unknown, which is a variable on here, I don't think it'll never return unknown unless you ask the state. But if it returned unknown, it means we haven't asked the user. Okay, we haven't asked the user before, can we have permission to use this feature? But what'll happen is the user will go yes or no. If they say no, it's going to return denied. If they click yes, it's going to return available. Now for geofencing, they can also turn off geofencing or GPS, or maybe they don't have cellular connectivity or whatever the case may be. So you may actually have a disabled or a not supported or restricted, right? So there's many different states of what can come out of it. For the most part, for this demo, we only care about available. How you choose to react to the other states is kind of how you choose to deal with it in your business logic. Does start monitoring work in the background even if the app is closed? Yes, that's the whole purpose of Shiny. So Shiny is different from like your Essentials, any of your MVVM frameworks. It's not a UI centric thing. It's designed for device access and backgrounding. So yes, it does work in the backgrounding when the app closes. Yes, it does survive reboots on Android for the most part. There are cases, if you find one, let me know and I'll fix it. So if the app is shut down, we can still wake it up with jobs. It depends on the platform. Android, the job framework that they use, it tends to get the job going again. But sometimes those can cause some issues. So it might... It should wake it up, but it doesn't necessarily have to. iOS, if it knows your user's trying to shut you up, so you're basically double tapping on the app and swiping it away, iOS will shut down things on you. It usually shuts them down for a day, so it's not indefinite. It generally tends to shut it down for a day. If you don't go into the app for, let's say, I'm not sure what the number is, it's kind of arbitrary, but if you don't go into it for, say, like a week, I think iOS just says you don't need to track this user anymore. And it is going to get more painful with iOS 13. I don't know what that story looks like, so I can't answer it yet. Sorry, I had to log in again. I may have missed my answer to my question about start monitoring. Yes, Danny, start monitoring does work in the background. If the app's closed on iOS, it may shut it down. It really depends on the version and your settings. But it does do a pretty good job of getting it open. Again, it depends. If it thinks that you're abusing something, it may just kill it on you, and then you have to wait a day before it wakes up. Is there any other questions? Okay, so we got 15 minutes left. So we showed kind of how a geofence gets going. There's one other thing to a geofence, one more parameter. There is a case where you may not want to repeat. I think this is on there. It should be on there. Huh. Where did I put this? Once. Sorry, I'm just trying to find. There is a parameter that allows me to say don't only fire single use. There we go. So if I only wanted this geofence to fire once forever and then delete itself, you can do single use. For instance, I want this to fire all the time. Whatever. Okay. So even though today we're not, I'm eventually in the next few streams, I'm going to do some Azure functions that's going to sync my to-do items to some sort of database. I'm going to do some logins and stuff. But for all intents and purposes today, I'm going to I am going to create the background job, and I'm going to show you how that kind of works. And then I'm going to register all this stuff, and then we'll take some closing questions. So let's create a sync job. And I'm going to inherit from iJob. So this is the periodic jobs that I was talking about earlier that's built into Shiny. And I'll show you how this works in a second. And again, it works all off of your dependency injection. So there's nothing fancy here. So what I'd probably inject here, right now I definitely need the SQL connection, but I'd probably inject some sort of data service, remote data service as well, so that I could actually receive and send to-do items. So maybe if I want to work across two different devices, so I have an Android phone, I have an iOS phone, you can see the data sync between the two. For now, we're not going to worry about that. So I'd probably get my to-do items somehow with some query saying what's synced, what's not synced, what's updated, what's not updated. I would do that here. So let's see, what can I do now? So this job is going to run periodically. Like I said, how iOS and Android work. Android's going to run this roughly every 10 minutes. So what we would do is get out all of our to-do items that need to be synced and send them, and then request from the server, okay, what's new? What do you want me to store here? So it'd be like a send and receive. And what this Boolean parameter is doing is it's also helping the service figure out when there's data. Now, this is mostly required for iOS. Because it's called background fetch, the jobs are expecting you to talk to a remote API, right? So a lot of people want to do like notifications here. I wouldn't suggest using jobs as like a notification engine, like a periodic notification engine. I would use it more in a case of where you actually go off to a server and say, hey, here's some data, or hey, what data you got for me? And if you return some data, like you actually get some data, return true. Okay? If you don't get data or you didn't really do anything, like there was nothing new, return false. So again, this only matters to iOS. Android doesn't care. It's like, whatever, I'll just keep running. I'll run again in 10 minutes. What iOS does is it gets intelligent about it. So if it sees, okay, well, you're not getting data in the middle of the night, or you don't get data in the middle of the day because maybe you're at work, you're not using the app in the middle of the day, I'm not going to run background sync. But I see you start getting a lot of data, say around like this time on a Friday, I'm going to start running your background sync a lot at say 5 p.m. on a Friday. So it's intelligently figuring out when there's going to be change. It's not an arbitrary number. I can't tell you the exact science for how they do it, but that's pretty close. So it's just a normal job. It's something, this is going to wake up and run. It's going to tell you the last time the job did run. If it did. Nope. Last run, it's in a UTC. So if you wanted to say, okay, well, when was the last time this ran? You can check that. The other thing you need to do is you don't need to try catch. Okay. So one of the things with Shiny is I log and I try catch for you. So you can't actually blow up your app. If this guy keeps erroring, I'll keep recording it, but you don't have to worry about your app dying. So let's say you had, let's say your Azure functions or Azure took a dump. It's offline right now and your phone has connectivity. It's expecting those services to be available. It'll try and run it. It's because it's got internet. So it's going to try and push data and it's going to fail. It doesn't mean I want your whole app to crash. And I don't want you to have to write try catch all the time. I put this off to a logging mechanism and you can review it later if you want, but I won't let the app crash in a background job. So any questions on what I mean by that? Don't try catch is basically what I'm saying. You don't need to. Dan. So if I want it to assume I always need data, always return true. No, return true when you do it. I think iOS actually watches bandwidth. So don't lie to it. I'm pretty sure they watch if there's bandwidth, and if you tell it it's true, you might anger it. Don't fart with iOS. They win, you lose. Daniel, do you have to have the app open or on the background for these jobs to run? No, the job. Okay, so in iOS, yes, the job is only going to run if your app is in the background, but I'll show you how to run the jobs in the future manually. It's clear. Is there a hook for logging hook for Shiny? Yes, there is. I'll cover that in just a second because I'm going to remind me if I forget, but yes, there is. Okay, so now we've got a sync job. We're going to do something with that in the future. We've got our global exception handler. We've got our delegate. I just want to talk quickly and kind of in closing about how we register all this stuff with Shiny. I haven't plugged this into Prism today. We didn't get that far, but that's all right. I'm going to do that in the next stream. Dan, I'll use your extension in the next stream. I won't do the complicated stuff. So now what I have to do is I have to create, or I have to inject the services that aren't there. So you saw me use that file system service earlier. I don't need to inject that. Shiny is going to put that file system service in all the underlying clutter that it needs, like the job manager and all that stuff. It's going to do that for itself. You don't need to inject it. You don't need to say uses jobs. It's only the optional services like notifications and geofencing that you need to register. So everything that Shiny needs is there. Everything that you need, you put here. So I'm going to actually register our job. I'm going to register job. And new job info. Yes. And I need this. So what I'm doing is I'm registering our job. It's kind of registering it on the container. I won't go into too much depth about this today. But what this does is it knows how, when the background wakes up, how to serialize our job, how to get all that stuff going, how to get all that logging going. So I'm going to do type of sync job. I have to give it a name or an identifier. The reason for this is maybe you want to have multiple sync jobs with different parameters, and I'll show you that in a second. So I'm good for now. I'm just going to call this sync job, but you could call it sync job 1, sync job 2, whatever. I'm actually going to bring this job external because I'll show you all the arguments you can pass in, and then I'll go back to the job real quick. So this is the intent to register a job. So there's parameters. It's just a dictionary. You can pass in a key value of arguments. So let's say, you know what? I'm drawing a blank on what kind of parameters I'd pass this job right now, but you could pass jobs to it. you can pass parameters, different parameters to it. And what else is there in here? Oh, the big one. This job specifically, I only want it to run if it has internet, because obviously I'm only going to sync data if you have internet. Now for this one, I can actually say do it over an unmetered connection. So like I'm connected to Wi-Fi or I'm connected to Ethernet if I'm on a UWP thing. But for all intents and purposes, I want to run it on any. So if you have any sort of network connection, run that job. So it's kind of like filtering. The other thing you can do is if the device is charging, maybe you only want to run it then. I don't know why. You could. What else is there? Oh, if the battery's not low. So only try and run this job if the battery's not low. Okay, so I'm going to put this back. I'm going to register this job. Is there any questions so far? I know I'm kind of hitting a lot of points. There's a lot of stuff in Shiny. I'm quite excited about it. I hope other people are too. I've been working like a mad fool on this. How are the parameters exposed to the job? Yep. So if we go back to our job here, if you see this job info that comes in, that's essentially what I'm registering on right here. So it's passing that job info through. Now the cool part is that the job info, you can alter the parameters and I'll resave them after your job. So let's say you wanted to change whatever the parameter was. So it was, maybe you had I don't know. Let's say you had a counter or you added another parameter. So now the counter's, I++, I don't know, whatever you wanted to do. It'll actually serialize those back after the fact. Same with job info. If this job is run successfully, it'll set the last run UTC. Maybe you don't want it to repeat anymore. So jobs have the same concept as geofences. You can run them forever or you can run them once. But I could say, you know what, job, you're done. Don't repeat anymore. So this essentially deletes it. So the job will never run again if you wanted to do that. So there's like a ton of options with jobs. Take a look. Job info has everything, and it comes through to your job. The one other thing to notice is that I pass a cancellation token in. You should respect that. And the reason you should respect that is because iOS or Android may kill your job. Android, for instance, if it sees, okay, well, there's no internet anymore, it may just kill your job. So you have to respect it. And if you don't respect it, it's going to shut it down on you anyways. iOS, you got 30 seconds to finish here. You don't finish in that 30 seconds, too bad. But at least you know if the cancellation is being requested. You can tell it, okay, well, the sync didn't finish or it errored or whatever. But keep an eye on it. I don't have anything personally that runs more than 30 seconds back here. So just don't do it. Okay, what else we got here? Let me see what other questions are here. When you're using the existing Prism app, right? I'm in the blog showing you where to register your Shiny startup where you're using. Yes, this does integrate with Prism. We didn't get so much back to the UI. I am going to get to that in the next stream. So everybody knows I'm going to try and do this every Friday, usually sometime between 3 and 5. So next week I'm going to get into kind of the more integration points with Prism and ReactiveUI, and I'm going to start actually running the app. We didn't actually get to running this app because I babbled too much. Do you have a sample to suggest how handling that cancellation? No. And the reason is because it depends what you're doing in that job. Like often if you're doing like an HTTP call, so say like a post async, it has a cancellation token in there. So just pass the same cancellation token through to your HTTP service. But I'll keep that in mind. That is a good question. Is there any questions I missed? I need to get moderators for this channel. People need to tell me if I'm missing something. I'll be busy learning for a while. Okay. So last but not least, so we've registered our job. We've registered geofencing. We've registered notifications. I want to show one other thing, and then I'm going to be done for the day, is this global exception handler. So Shiny has one other thing, and I brought this out of, is anybody familiar with AutoFac? Anybody use AutoFac? Actually, I guess the better question is, who doesn't know what AutoFac is? Okay, I'm going to assume everybody knows what it is. So AutoFac has, okay, so what AutoFac is a dependency injection. What they have is this concept of startable tasks. So what those startable tasks do is when the container is being built, you are missing something, Dan. Don't listen to Dan. It is slow on mobile. I wouldn't use AutoFac in mobile too much, but it's not terrible. Don't listen to him. He doesn't like server code anyways. He loves his mobile. Dry IOC is definitely faster for mobile, but AutoFac is the container on steroids. But it has this thing called a startable task, or startable. They call it iStartable, and I love it because I use that a lot. So when my container builds or my app is starting up, essentially, I like to register certain services. I like to get them going. So I may listen to an event such as if my user's logged in, so let's say I had a user logged in. If I wanted to do this, it's horrible. I could say if the user's logged in, start something. I could watch an event on that user to say if the user signs out, stop the job, stop geofencing, stop all that crap, delete all the data, etc. I could do all that here, and I could hook those events. I wouldn't do a lot of logic here, basically. Now, what I'm doing with the startup task in this case on our global exception handler is I want to put this global exception handler on this static variable as part of ReactiveUI. And I want to inject like logging. And if anybody knows, I do this thing called iUser dialogues. I don't really use it for more than demos anymore. But maybe I want to display an alert when there's an error, and then log it off to say App Center or something. So what I would do is I would inject my properties into the global exception handler. What's going to happen is it's going to start this little beast as soon as the app starts, and then it's going to call this void start. And at this point, I'm going to say, set my default exception handler to this guy. So I'm going to show you what that means one more time. I'm going to say services register startup task. So this isn't a background job. This is something that it's like a little module that runs when your app starts. So global exception handler. So what this is going to do is it's going to create injection points. So my global exception handler now gets all that injection goodness if I needed it, and I can use it when the command errors. Kind of looks magical, but it's not. And last but not least, the logging, which somebody was asking about. Sorry if I forget who was asking about it. Log is the only exception in Shiny that's not dependency injection driven. There's actually a very good reason why I don't, because I believe logging should be free from all framework just in case. Because let's say something fails in those dependencies or when the container's building, logging never got going. So I like to keep logging just out of the way of everything. So while it's built into Shiny, it's static. It's the one thing that is static. But you can add your own logger. So there's an iLogger interface that you can add. Say if you wanted to do App Center, or maybe you had your own logging framework or whatever, and you want to pipe through to Shiny just to say, Shiny, if one of my jobs erred because Alan said don't put a try catch in, I'd like to log it. Right? So you can do that. You can add your own custom logging there. Last but not least, there is use console. This is the built-in mechanisms, and use debug. Is there any questions? I think on that note, it's 5 o'clock. I think we've kind of hit our timeline. I think this is pretty cool. The job right now, Danny, isn't doing anything. It will be in the future. So next Friday, I'll be continuing to do some work on the job, some work on the UI, and I'll integrate this with Prism and ReactiveUI. Yes, Daniel's right. I am presenting at the Toronto Mobile User Group next week. There is a live stream. Daniel will share it. I hope you can share it. I'm pretty much going to be talking about a lot of the same things. Probably not 2 hours long. I don't know. Do I have 2 hours next week? But yeah, I'm going to be doing pretty much the same thing. Sorry, Daniel, if I ruined it for you. Well, I have stickers. I'm bringing stickers. Oh, I should. Oh, yes. Dan has sent me some stickers. They haven't come yet. It's next Tuesday. So I hope they come before Tuesday. Actually, they have to come on Monday, Dan. Otherwise, I'm not going to have them for Tuesday. There are shiny stickers, and I will have them at the Xamarin Dev Summit if anybody wants them. I do not have a ticket giveaway. I'll see what I can do for the next round. I got to fix the chat first because I have no bots. So if there are no other questions, guys, thanks for coming. This is kind of fun. This is my first stream. Yeah, fun times. So thanks again, and hopefully see you guys next week. I'll put it on Twitter, the times and everything again. Thanks so much, guys. Where's my close button here now? There's my streaming abilities.